I don't know if it's the same in England, but I do know that for us, there are 3 different stages. So for example, if you are brain dead, then you, obviously, you want not to be resuscitated. But then there are 2 other stages where you might think, yes, I do want to be. So I think you need to find out if it's just one question, and this goes with what you're saying, or if you have 3 choices, depending on how far gone you are.
I don't know how many of you are in big HMOs. I'm in Kaiser, and I got a whole pamphlet from them with all kinds of questions to fill out and then take it there and have it on file there, so you don't trust it somewhere far away from there. But,
Well, maybe thinking about different questions, Sue, helping me out again, gave me this, and it is an alternative workbook of things that need to be answered. I'll put this out on the table if anybody would like to peruse that. Yes?
This is pre-DNR, and many of you have probably already designated this. But you should be very careful also about access to your medical records. People tend to be even more restrictive than they thought, and access to medical records is extremely limited. I recently found out that my daughter-in-law, who is a physician in the same medical group as the pediatrician to her children, cannot access the records of her own child, and even though she works in the same group. And the same thing, my sister had an event, a cardiac event, and her stepdaughter worked in the anesthetist's office and got fired because she accessed my sister's medical records without being designated on the paper.
Those are good points. We need to be really careful to be sure we give permission to the right people. And
yes, be sure you give written permission and think of both situations, not just people you don't want to see, but also perhaps a couple more people who you would want to see the record.
good point. Cindy?
When you designate the person for power of attorney, you can change that. It is not set in stone. So, for example, I discovered that the person I originally, after my husband's death, had put for my power of attorney, I discovered a few years later that this person could not make an emergency decision on a dime. And I decided that maybe he wasn't the best person in the world to be my advocate. I went down a generation, and I think that's something to consider. In other words, this happens to be a step-granddaughter, or a niece, or a nephew, or something like that. Somebody who was likely, if you are widowed, to be a survivor of you.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think that's very important in more than just health things, because I have been trustee of 2 trusts of an old and very good close friend for 25 years, and I recently am resigning from them because my feeling is that I'm now, and the beneficiary of that trust is her second husband, who is now 90 and but looking very healthy, and I think we are more collegial in age, and that it should go to the next generation, should be the trustee, because something can happen to me and that would not be good for him. And so it's not just medical things, it's estate planning and all of that you need to, I think we all need to think of. I'm not been very good at this myself, I will say that, but I think that we need to think of the next generation. And there's a fair amount of work in it, and I think anybody who has done it realizes that, and so it's not so easy necessarily to find a trustee.
Yes.
Also, on that same subject, the power of attorney is very far-reaching, while the person may be incapacitated but not dead. a lot of things going on, so you have to be very careful in setting out your desires or your actions. I was involved in a very lengthy and ugly law case for my sister, in which the power of attorney had just acted in her husband had just acted in her own interest, and completely devastated the estate.
You guys have lots more information about this than I do, and I appreciate it. And rather than continue down the list, I think we need to hear some of the other panelists. Look over the list, talk to your attorneys, talk to your medical people, and be sure that you have, in a place that can be found, all of these important papers. Dee.
One thing that is not on the list is computer passwords.
What was that?
Computer passwords.
I've been told to call that the digital will, and there's been several people I know whose husbands have died and they had to hire experts, and they couldn't get into their husband's computer, and 2 years later, they were absolutely, it was awful. So my
That's
husband
a
who sits
very
there and I
good
are
point.
trying to write these down, and you can put them in other places, but if you have a lock on the whole computer, you can't even get in to get it.
Sure.
There are password managers, small pieces of software, which are thoroughly encrypted, in which you can store all of your passwords, your banking information, your checking accounts, all of that, credit card and so on, including your driver's license number, all of this sort of thing, that you want to keep in one place, that's encrypted so it's protected, and it's under one, and you pick a strong password.
And then you have
Make
to
sure
remember
you
that
pass and do it long before you need it, because you never know what's gonna happen. Tomorrow will be an accident.
Is that something you have to buy?
And that is key, because all of your accounts online will continue on. You wanna close that Facebook account, you wanna close that LinkedIn account, and all the rest of it.
Do you recommend a website?
Well, I'll recommend 2 pieces of software, at least that are available for Macintosh, and I know for PCs are iPassword, which I think is for both systems, and Splash ID is another. And there are several others, but if you type in Password Manager into Google, you'll get a long list.
Yes.
Just one other point, after you get all this information together, and it takes a long time to pull it all together, you have to review it at least once a year and update it. Because your credit card numbers and expiration dates change, your driver's license changes, your passport changes, and you've got to keep it up to date or it's not going to be helpful to other people.
Thank you. Nancy?
Make sure your children and their children have wills and things. When my son died 8 years ago, he had nothing. And it took me, he had property both in Illinois and in Minnesota. I had to go through 2 years of trying to do things an inordinate amount of expense to settle his estate. So, when everybody said, what can I do for you after my son died, I said, make sure your children have a will. And many children in their 30s or 40s don't think, I'm not gonna die tomorrow, I don't need something.
So this is an imperative for everyone to get to. And the other imperative that we don't have on the program is downsizing. It's annoying, it's a lot of work, it's a gift to the people who will be caretaking your estate, is to do some downsizing. And in the process, I've done it, we've just moved to a retirement community, which by the way, I recommend highly for you to consider. We're very happy there. But two things that were very hard for me is getting rid of books. I had a terrible time, cried my eyes out until my daughter said, Mother, there are libraries. And the other thing is perhaps you're really excited about that paper that you wrote for Baby English and you got an A. It was the only A you got at Mount Hoyle. Nobody cares.
I